Let me tell you a story. In the beginning, the creator, Karora, he lay sleeping under a mound of rich soil. As he slept, he began to stir in his sleep and he began to dream. Then the most astonishing thing happened. His dreams burst out of his body. It was great mountains and deep rivers flowing into vast oceans. Then it was plants and insects and all manner of animals and great nations of people. Then it was a multitude of stars and then the entire cosmos. All of them came out of the great God's body and became the universe as we know it today. This is how the Aborigines of Australia believe the world was made. I've always been fascinated by stories of how the world came to be. Creation myths, as they are called, or creation stories, are stories from different cultures and beliefs that describe how the world as we know it came into existence. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of creation stories from every nation and culture around the world. The stories range from being bizarre to being beautiful and a lot of the time quite poetic as well. The one that most of us are familiar with is from Genesis, where
God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Amazulu believe that uNkulunkulu is the creator who broke off the people from the reeds, and then the cattle, and then other peoples, and he also broke off medicine men and dreams. Basotho always believe that man appeared from the reeds. More often than not though, there are many variations to each of these stories depending on who you ask really. But the one thing that all creation stories have, however, is the compulsion to make our understanding the center of the story, even the scientific perspective of creation. Our stories have mothers, they have fathers, wives, husbands, and sons and daughters, and plants, and feuds and sagas. And all of these somehow caused creation to come into being. Most creation stories have a god or gods who function very much like human beings with superpowers. Every god in every belief has human inclinations of love and hate and jealousy and anger and joy, and just about every other human trait that you can think of. The scientific perspective is no different really. It just replaces the humans and human inclinations with chemical reactions. Specifically the chemical reactions that scientists and machines can process. Science can tell us that gravity exists, but it can't tell us why we live in a world where gravity exists. In fact, the entirety of the scientific field collapses at the moment just before the Big Bang. Again, you have to keep in mind that all of these stories exist within what we as human beings can conceive of conceptually. Consider this. A jellyfish floating about in the ocean has no conception of the cognitive capacity of a human psyche. If two divers were to get into a fight in the ocean and bump into the jellyfish, it would not have any conception of what was happening to it. All that it can perceive are the changes in the flow of water and the physical sensation of the impact. What if one of the divers is actually protecting the jellyfish from the other diver who's trying to kill it? None of that really matters to the jellyfish because it can't perceive all of that. What about the jellyfish compared to an ant? Neither one has a conception of the other. Compared to the jellyfish, the human psyche exists on a totally different part of the spectrum beyond its perception. So then the question is, how wide is this spectrum? Compared to the jellyfish, the human psyche exists on a totally different part of the spectrum, far beyond the jellyfish's perception. So then the question is, how wide is this supposed spectrum? And I'm using the term spectrum loosely here, so let me try to break it down and make it a bit simpler. Imagine a thermometer, except the thermometer that we are talking about doesn't measure temperature. It measures vibrational frequency. That is because all of existence, even the spiritual realm, is made up of vibrations of energy, all vibrating at different frequencies. And if you'd like to know more about this and how it works, please go listen to episode 7 and I will talk more in detail about all of this. Now, on the lower end of this thermometer that measures the spectrum of existence, you have low vibrating undifferentiated matter. And at the top end, you have high frequency vibrations, the highest of which is what we call spirit. Now, it is easy to assume that the high end spirit level is the entity that we call God. And that's not entirely the case. If all of existence fits on this spectrum and the highest level of it is spirit, understand that God is not on the spectrum. God created the spectrum. God holds the thermometer in his hand. Now, the first assumption that we have to make about how this spectrum of existence works is the idea of boundaries between states of being. Is the ant living a totally different kind of existence compared to the jellyfish? To the ant and the jellyfish, they definitely are. But to us humans who have access to both worlds, not really. The world underwater and the world on land are just two interpretations of basically the same existential idea. The one has less water and the other one has far more water. But there is water in the atmosphere and there are gases underwater. So does our ability to understand these concepts make us gods? Not even slightly. And why not? Because ultimately ourselves and the ant and the jellyfish are all governed by the same laws of nature. Yet we can take the soil that the ant lives on and build skyscrapers that reach for the heavens, and we can use water that the jellyfish lives in and power vast industrial projects. So we come back to the question of how wide is the spectrum? If we exist so far above ants and jellyfish, yet we don't even qualify to call ourselves gods, which other beings are we ants and jellyfish too? Yet they also don't even qualify to be called gods. Beings whose form and nature and abilities lay far beyond our perception and even our comprehension. What if they, just like us, are just ants and jellyfish on the spectrum of existence? Yet we are all on the same spectrum, on different levels with no solid barriers to each. When we consider those above us on the spectrum of existence, are we delving into mythology? Is it religion? Is it science? Is it spirituality? And in all of that, in all of this spectrum, where does our conception of African spirituality find its place? This is a complex and murky topic, and it is very easy to fall down the rabbit hole and find yourselves knee-deep in wild conspiracy theories. So I decided to speak to Mkhulu Makhanya, who is a healer and to many people a spiritual teacher. And all I can say is that if you don't know him yet, you probably will, eventually. So what I want to do to start off. Yeah? I want to start at the beginning of the beginning, right? As in literally the beginning of time. I want to start with origin stories. You know, we all know origin stories, the most popular one being Genesis, and the Adam and Eve. You know, as much as, you know, in Christianity, for them it's a historical thing, whereas other people seems like it's more like fairy tales. You know, but so to believe that human beings come from Gomatlaking by a river, you know. Then there's Umvelingang, and then there's, you know, all those, which when you follow the story, it speaks of actual physical origins. You know, so I'm curious, in your point of view, how do origin stories impact how we relate to our beliefs?
That's a good question. If you take Christianity, for example, they have Good Friday, for example. In the church that I used to go to, in the Methodist Church, we would start on Sunday. Say it's this particular Sunday. And then Sunday leading to Friday, the death of Jesus. And then from that particular Sunday until Friday, the death of Jesus, in between we would have evening services. And then it would be sort of a journey towards Jesus' death. You know, there are events that happen prior to his death. And then come Friday, it's Jesus' death, and then Saturday and then Sunday, Jesus rises. And this thing happens every year. And it is a repetition of the same thing. Every year we do the same thing. The verses don't change. The sermon's content might change a bit here and there, but it is the same story every year. And that period serves to renew the commitment of Christians towards their faith and where they walk. And that is called the spirituality of memory. So unfortunately, in the space of Ubungoma, or African spirituality, the stories of our beginnings and where we started and what makes us who we are not told as often. We do not practice the spirituality of memory. The best we can do is to refer to a period which is probably 100 years ago, 200 years ago
At most.
You see that? And I mean, 200 years is yesterday. We used to stay in KZN, and then there was mud houses, and Indota never used to do this, Inyanga never used to do this, you know. So even as we try to locate this experience to something historic, it is so recent, it's so yesterday. In some instances, you even find individuals who used to live in those times who are 110, 98, you understand? But if you had to compare it, for example, using Christianity as a point of comparison, I mean, we're talking about a story that happened 2,000 years ago, and the impact and the influence it still continues to have on the people. So, unfortunately, with us, the loss of memory then leaves us in a point where we have to begin to add things inside this African spirituality thing in order to prove that it is valid. For example, I mean, Umangamba, you know, a lot of healers, I see a lot of Christian influence in Ubungoma. There's no problem. My only problem is the spirit in which it is done. Uguti, you are trying constantly to validate Ubungoma and African spirituality as something that is worthy, something that is safe, something that is fine, something that is harmless. Look, even in the Bible, there's things that we do that are found in the Bible and it's fine, you know? So relax. So I think, you know, to answer your question, we are operating from from a space of lack, from a space of kuyashoda, man, you know, and due to then lacking in the spirituality of memory, you see in how we then practice ubungoma. If it's not Christianity, then it is this thing of trying to prove ukuthi ubungoma can actually be modern. I'm not saying it mustn't evolve. I'm not saying it mustn't be relevant to the audience and people in this day and time. However, there are things that we call variables, things that you can vary. And there are things that we call constants, things constant. Constant? Yeah. Things that you cannot change, things that you can't compromise. But yeah, we are suffering from that, the absence of spirituality of memory.
Okay. On that note, there are across Africa, there are different variations of belief systems, hopefully gravitating around or orbiting around the same ideas. But at the same time, there are different variations, yes, but also we've been through different eras of different beliefs, right? Most notably, the ever-present dynastic Egypt.
Yes.
Can you give us maybe like a brief breakdown of our spiritual history? Like, where did we because I'm trying to place us as 2021 African spiritualists. Where exactly do we fit in? So in your understanding, what was the starting point
for us? Touching my heart. Phew.
It's a heavy one.
No, it just brings me to tears. It's not even about heavy, but it just brings me to tears. So there are two places. So the common understanding in South Africa is that the Khoisan were the first people to come here. And that is historically incorrect. You don't have to believe me. Go look to South Africa and see those mountains that were carved. And there's nowhere in the history of Khoisan does it say ukuthi ama Khoisan ibona bazenzile leza zinto. There's a lot of things. Go to that stone in Mpumalanga, that stone that is directly linked to the sun, and so we had, in the very beginning, there was do we call it a land or a world? I don't know. What do you call it? But let's just say that there was, and this is just me, because I lack the words to describe this place, but let's just say that there was a first South Africa that existed right at
as in
geographically, literally, right at the tip of Limpopo. So, if you had to leave South Africa now and access that space, you would go through Venda, Limpopo, out, as if you headed to Bait Bridge into Zimbabwe. So, in the outskirts of right in the borders of South Africa, Gagwa, right? And then that land and that place was created by the Bantu people, by the gods of the Bantu. And over there we practiced metaphysics, medicine, chemistry as well. And that place literally exploded into extinction because of the practices and the experiments that were happening among healers and alchemists of the Bantu origin. And that place literally exploded into extinction. And when it died, then that's when South Africa was born. To say we need to create another space, another land, another place for Abantu to be able to live and exist. And this is how we are taught that we ended up here as Abantu who lived in this part of this continent.
So it's not the Bantu migration from the Congo downwards.
That's yesterday. That is even yesterday. That happened way after that explosion, apparently, in that side of. I'll just get the name of that land for you.
Because my understanding is that this migration from the Middle Eastern Africa happened about 5,000 years ago.
I'm with you.
So you're saying that probably millennia before that,
Absolutely.
there were other people.
There were other people,
Okay.
you know. The book Black Roots Science, and Black Roots Science is a metaphysician who's probably based in America. He speaks of this land. And obviously Credomoto speaks of this land. Indaba My Children, and I think Song in Our Stars speaks of this land. So two individuals are speaking about the same thing, right? So that's where we come from. 1. 2. Ubungoma, African spirituality. We call it African spirituality because it is practiced in Africa. Contextually, practically, its space of expression is in Africa among black people. Sharp. But Ubungoma in its essence is a cosmic experience. There are 4 particular stars who are credited with giving us this gift of healing, of science, of maths, of science, of metaphysics. And they have given us this gift of Ubungo. They are the same stars who gave the gift of healing to the ancient people of what is this nationality that rebelled? Haiti. The spirituality of the people of Haiti.
Voodoo. I forgot.
Those guys.
I know it, but I forgot.
Those guys.
Yeah.
They also credit their healing systems to these 4 stars who gave them this gift of healing and knowing stuff. So they gave us the stars, then those 4 particular stars then gave us this gift and said, you will do what you know based on the needs and the challenges that you face where you live. So we come from the stars. Our gift comes from the stars. Our gift is cosmic. Our healing system is cosmic. Our history as a people is that we emanate from a source that is giving off light. The surname Koza means a horizon. It is a remembrance of where we come from. When you listen to Istakazelo So Shabalala Batibona Baye Kemo Babuya, that speaks of their journey to Kemet, for example. But that is not their origin. It just speaks of their traveling. The Shabalala people know themselves coming from a source. Myself, Makhanya, we come from a source that was giving off light. So that's where we come from. But black people as a collective, we are not all emanating from the same source. Bakona laba among us who come from the water. The Swati people will tell you that they come from the reeds. They come from Emanzini. So as we gather as a group here, we all come from different sources.
What does it mean? What does it mean, or what does it translate into? To look similar, but we come from different sources. Like, what does that translate to? And then aren't we then inherently different people?
That's true. And that is what makes the whole Konamanje, if we have to fast forward your question and contextualize it to modern time. That's why Konamanje, we can't agree. It's okay, are we going to have corruption or not? Are we going to power to the people or not? And some of us find it easily to just turn their backs on the people and just do what they like, betray the people.
So then, from what you're saying, the difference in our practices is not only a cultural issue. It's an issue of origin.
Exactly.
But the tricky part is that it sort of implies that then we have to practice differently.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's what it is. When someone comes to me and they say I have a calling and I need to twasa, I'll make that because it's then our immediate. What is this thing of wanting to standardize how ancestors call us? Ubonamanzi, ubonipubezi, ubonimasela, you know? Fine, that happens to some people, but look, that can't be everybody's narrative because we are not from the same place. For example, I became a healer. I didn't see Lisila. I didn't see a lion. And in my humble opinion, if I remember correctly, I only dreamt of water twice. And the water was coming out of this pasa shop that we used to buy kosona kokasi. So I never had a mystical dream where I was underwater and I saw snakes and, I didn't have that. You see? And if I had to come to you as a Kobela and say to you, I think I have a calling, and then you say, how do you know? And I tell you something different. Chances are you're going to say, I don't have a calling because I don't fit into the narrative.
Or I'm misinterpreting what's actually what the dreams were.
Exactly. You see that? There's a gentleman that came here yesterday, consulting. And then this ancestor came up and he said, okay, this is my son. He's a reincarnation of my son. In his past life, he was disabled and he has come back and I want him to continue with the work that our family then set out to do. So the client asked me, ask this gentleman Vela from which side, my mother's side or my father's side? And this ancestor replied and he said, I come from the stars. You see? And the client was then not satisfied because he's looking for something local. He's looking for something familiar.
Something he understands.
Something he understands, something he's heard before.
Something he can tell other people.
You know what I mean? But
because you can't tell anyone that you come from the stars.
That's crazy.
Unless you're in the woke crowd. And even they won't believe you.
Yeah,
okay.
So that's then our origins, strictly speaking. We come from places that are far beyond us. And there's life in those places. And I can tell you today, I can tell you now, Black people are suffering because our people are suffering in those places. Does it make sense? As you stay in Joburg and your home is Cape Town, your people are struggling in Cape Town. And that's why you are struggling here.
So when you say where they're from or the other people, are you talking about a physical place or a different realm?
A different realm, a different place, yes. Where we come from. And all these rituals that we perform, Phahla, Uktwasa, Uklaba, it is us aligning ourselves with those places so that as we give them life, they give us life. And that's the principle of life, give and take, reciprocity.
Okay.
You see that?
Because I've always wondered, because we talk about ancestors, we talk about where they are, but I've never really heard a description of where are they. Yes, they are they're almost like in a different frequency, yes. And we get the sense that they are amongst us, yes. But if I were to be in that world, what would I see? Or am I just on earth behind a glass mirror type of thing? I've never thought of where are they? Is my father sitting on a chair? Is he floating in the air? Is my grandmother in a house? Is she in a fort? You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine, I can't visualize what that place is
looks like. So our ancestors and the people that have departed stay in places that are determined by their level of awareness and level of spiritual growth. If we take a typical individual, born, raised, goes to school, goes to work, works, builds a family, and dies. No awareness of spirituality and the laws of nature and whatever. He just lives what we call an average life. No spiritual education whatsoever. They stay in places that look exactly like this planet. In this planet, you have your Cape Towns, which are fancy places. In Cape Town, you also get your Khayelichas, places that are not necessarily fancy. If you're in Pretoria, you get your Waterkloofs, Garsfontein, nice places. You also get places like Soshanguve and Mamelodi. And there are also worse places than Koketswang, Kokaseketswang, Onali. There's still people who stay in shacks, in KZN, you still get Dundee people who still stay in mud houses. So where they are is a direct reflection of this place. They are in need of money, food, shelter, medical care, education, literally everything. The only difference is that material stuff over there is not as accessible as it is here. And it is for that reason that we have what is called altars, and we give them food, water, and money, and send them houses on a daily.
Do they know that they're there?
They do. They do. A person that has died through an accident will reincarnate quicker than a person that has died through natural death, for example. So if you die through a natural death, you will be taken through a process of being taught that you have died and what it means. It is for this reason that people will consult with you and say someone died and then they are not coming back or they are not saying anything. For example, after my dad died in 2008, obviously I was crying endlessly, and he came to me and he said to me, "Son, I don't even know where I am. Could you just please give me time to settle in, and then I'll come back and I'll tell you where I am." Right? And then in this place, while he was talking and I'm looking at him, I see water in the background. There's water. Water goes away, then I see sand. Sand goes away, then I see fire. Fire goes away, then I see the sky. It was the most fascinating thing for me. So they need to be taken through a process where they are taught that they have died. And they need to accept that they've died. Once they have accepted, then they will take into these facilities and then they are put there. The last time I was there, I saw people that I grew up with, kokas, old men, old women that have died. And mopili, it looked like a fancy hospital, like your Netcare or whatever. And then I speak to the security guard and he says to me, "Who are you here to see?" And I said, "I don't know, man. I just came to see people." And I walked in. And when I walked in at the back, it was a literal hostel, like hostile situation. But people are starving, and some of them go on to even say, they are employed by demons, they have to work for demons, and then demons then give them food for survival. Sometimes the agreement is that you'll get a cool drink and bread, and then when you're done working, the demon will decide you're just going to get bread. No cool drink. Sometimes they get given cool drink. So, if we can give, and you'll remember this, that in the ancient time when you die, kings would be thrown in with their spears, with servants, This was a literal thing. You would take these things with you. How's am I? So they stay in places where literally they are suffering mainly because of miseducation around death and spirituality and our origins, as you put it. Jews practice altar worship, altar offerings. Muslims do it. Chinese do it. Who else does it? Practically everyone does it. It is just the black race that does not want to do these things. And it's the things that we used to do. And look at the amount of poverty. Just in conclusion, I can see you want to ask something.
Okay.
The government is there to complement your state of awareness. So how tlore maburuki bana ba batshwereng tšhelete njan. By tshwere because you are ignorant of your own power. You are ignorant of where money comes from. We are taught that money comes from the government, from a job. There are people with PhDs, they are poor. There are people who have studied to no end. They have 2 companies, but look, they're poor. What happens to their money? You understand? But Jews know the principles of money. They know like money is an energy that comes from somewhere. And if you follow certain rituals, then you're able to attract money into your life.
You mentioned that the Jews do altar worship and the Muslims. I want to talk about mysticism. Yeah. The Jews have the Kabbalah. Islam has the Sufis or Sufism. Where are the black mystics?
The black mystics ought to be Abangom. Christians have Christians have Gnostics and Essenes.
Yes, the Essenes.
Those are the keepers of the esoteric knowledge, the mysteries of spirituality. The Jews have what?
Kabbalistic practices.
Yes, or priests or whatever.
Yeah.
Those guys are the ones that are holding the knowledge holders of the mysteries of spirituality. Africa, it's supposed to be Abangom who are holding those secrets of mysticism or whatever you want to call it.
Because the only person I think we generally know of is Kebab Credo.
Yes.
And there's almost literally no one else. Unless we go broader and include Shembe and Makhanya. And I don't even know if that qualifies as...
At a time of his death, in that day, Credo Mutwa, I think there were 6 Sanusis that were left on his level. I don't know if they're still alive. But our awareness was that it's just that they're not on social media, they're not on the media. They're there.
Should they be?
Sorry?
Should they be?
I don't know. I mean, everyone has a choice on how they express
like
their...
they need Instagram.
Baba, they are there. And it's obviously beings with supernatural powers. Have you dreamt of Baba Credo before? Yeah. Then there are those of us who've dreamt of him. And so they watch us. They can see what we do. You know. They are able to tell South Africa, Kenya. It's a small place. So they are the ones that are the custodians. They are seeing, they are watching, you know. I mean, I remember I used to have snakes come at night and sniff on me. And they would have conversations, right? This guy is not serious. Okay, so I want potential, but this boy is still young, you know. And you listen to these people having conversations next to you. So they are there, they can see us, they can see what's happening. They can see the madness, they can see the good that we do. And they have their ways of influencing the course. But I think we need to get to a place where we deserve to sit at the feet of masters. It's not just because I'm black, unfortunately for us. Because I'm black, therefore, I'll sit next to Credo. Or I'll just drive to Northern Cape and knock at the door and say, Ninjan Bab. Some of them, it's an honor, it's a privilege to sit at their feet. Yeah.
Why is the spiritual realm, why does it not seem like it's the same thing for everyone? Why does it look like black people have a different spiritual realm, white people in the East have a different spiritual realm? Why isn't it, if creation is creation, why isn't everything that side the same?
The same. Because for 2 reasons. One, the creator has a knack for different experiences. One thing is dull and is boring. 2, the creator has given us the will to experience what we would like to experience. So say, for example, when you feel hurry, you want to experience, let me take this client, Waizolo, for example. The ancestor came up and he said to him, I'm asking of you to start a company that's going to explore potential and potentiality in relation to disease and pain. He says, as a father, because I was your father and in your past life you were disabled, I keep wondering to myself, how did my pain of fathering a disabled child disturb my process of knowing that I can be a father, you know, fully? So I want you to literally start a company that's going to explore on the potentiality of humans in the absence of pain and suffering and disease. So that's his curiosity. So the creator gave us that to say, use your will to express your curiosity or what you would like to experience. And this is how then, for example, Ganesha and Thoth And all these other gods went and built their own universes. And depending on your spiritual growth and maturity, if you are worthy, you can go stay in whichever universe. So this thing, we're going to go to one heaven. There are many heavens out there. Right? There are many heavens out there. Ganesha has his own planet in heaven. Thoth has his own planet in heaven. Ma'at, you understand? All these gods they've built, and they keep building. You see? So this pigeonhole understanding, we are supposed to be one thing, and it's just that a way to enslave us. And that's why, to answer your question, we are having different experiences because we keep having beings that want to experience different things. Like I'm not sure if you saw it on Facebook where I was saying, I'm curious as to why can't we have a Matosana who wear onesies? You see that? Curiosity.
And you mean that in terms of garments and... Okay.
Yeah. If we want to have a onesie, we can do that. But who says we can't?
Who says?
You know?
What happens when we lose our words? There are a lot of things that we can no longer say in our own language. What happens to the functionality of our spirituality when we no longer have words? Like, for example, I have a particular issue when it comes to, let's say we were Hlola and, then the person says, Kuneslwan. I've never heard of any other creature except Islwan. And I'm like, I am sure there's a spectrum of beings out there. And we only know of Islwan in a negative sense. I don't know of a creature of light. You know what I mean? Like, you it's rare to hear Kilo Trolla and then someone says, there's this creature looking after you. You will see it, wherever, And more than that, we'll talk about snakes, and then they'll only say a snake. What snake is it? How many snakes can I mention in my mother tongue? I can talk about cobras and anacondas and this and this and this, but in my language, I can't say that. I can just say no or nyok. You know what I mean? How does the loss of language impact how we function in spirituality?
Sure. That's a good question. We're not like I can say the Piro.
I did.
So this person walks in and he says, I'm from this healer and I went to consult. And this is how the conversation went. And halfway through this narrative, I started saying, and then ar, and then ar, and then ar. It's like, yeah, how do you know? No, I don't know because I'm a Sangom. But I know that we are starting to follow narrative because of lack of words. Does it make sense? I know Urubutsi citing yabo mama haunga kakimang, citing yabo papa haunga kakimang. Wena ulurileng, like how consultation will go. Based on part of it, okay, fine. Agreed, people are lazy. But based on the fact that we don't have words, right? And this is what I was writing about last week to say, in all fairness, if you are not intelligent, you are not intelligent. And let's not make intelligence as a property or a value of the elite. But intelligence is a matter of awareness, paying attention to what's happening, choosing to learn. Right? You listen, you're like, oh, this is how we address other people. Oh, this is how we apologize. This is how you say sorry. Oh, so when you want to make a proposal, these are the words that you use. Oh, you understand? It's a question of awareness. But because we have created an impression that when you become a healer or when you are born black, there's a certain level of wisdom and intelligence that gets downloaded into your psyche, and suddenly you become a wisdom keeper just because we're Twasile. It doesn't work like that. So the lack of words then means we have to become superstitious. We create things that are not there. For example, the spectrum of emotions that we are dealing with now, right? We've got fear, love, and I believe we have many more emotions. It's just that we have not developed the language to explain it. So when you feel something and you don't have a word for it, you want to force it to become something that it's not, just so that it makes sense to you. So for me, Irbakela superstition, Irbakela schizophrenia. Schizophrenic is when you start imagining things that are not there. Basically, this lack of words then begins to connect us to what is true, to what is factual, to what works. So that is what is happening.
So then, ultimately, what is going to happen if you consider that a lot of black people are now kotropong? Kids are growing up in the suburbs. Kids are growing up in English. All bahola basale. Our grandparents are no longer there. Our language is not growing; it's regressing. What will happen if our language is gone? Will we cease to connect with the spiritual realm because we don't have the language to access it?
So it has been my observation that in whichever level that humanity devolves into, there's always an agent that tries to intervene to stop the madness. So our greatest challenge will be, are we going to be able to see the signs? The question you're asking, it is a question of intervention. To say, probably your ancestors are saying to us, watch out, guys. So it is a question of, can we become aware enough to stop the madness? But to answer your question, it would mean then we would need to devolve into Ilwane. Ilwane is an entity or a being that does not have free will, but it has to be controlled either by an entity that has a free will or by nature.
Meaning by
the laws of nature.
Basic instinct.
Yeah.
It's survival instinct.
Yeah. When it's raining, you're going to seek shelter. When it's hot, uzopuma out of your shelter, go back outside. When it rains again, just like that. You will not have the intelligence to say, let me come up with an umbrella. Let me build a house. Let me come up with a sunscreen. We will not become those people.
That's scary.
And for me, if you think Uguti that is probably 2,000 years from now, it is happening now.
This is why I'm saying that it's scary, because it's starting to become clear that there's a deep reverse regression that is going.
Yeah.
And I almost want to say that I see it. You're starting to see it in how black men are.
Yeah.
It's like we're regressing. We're sort of going back into like almost animalistic.
Mkhulu, in Tembisa now, boys who smoke nyaube, buy a gonu gang, they take the money that we use to khansa, they take that money to buy loose draw. Buy a gomabitleng on the section of cremated people. They smoke ashes of dead people. We are not talking 2,000 years now. Utembisa, it's happening. What do you call that? It's crazy.
It's crazy, and I think it's even more scarier because I was talking to a friend of mine a few days ago, and I was like, "What's happening with black boys?" There are very few people who have, especially teenage boys, who are not at a loss as to what's going on. It's like the likelihood of a black male child amounting to anything today is minuscule. And it almost doesn't matter where they are, even the ones in the suburbs. You know, black boys seem deeply lost. Deeply, deeply, deeply lost in ways that it seems like it's a generational thing. You know, it's like very few black men are going to make it to adulthood as positive members of society. You know, and I can't understand that. There's something that is gripping us. We're in the grips of, you know, people will say it's patriarchy. A good deal of it is, but some things don't make sense. I understand patriarchy in that, you know, I'm more likely to get a better job. You know, I'm the head of the house. I get that. I don't get this thing of raping and dismembering and hanging pregnant women and burning, you know what I mean? Like shooting kids, all of your kids and killing your wife. That is not patriarchy.
Sure.
That is not patriarchy. That is something, and a lot of the time we can't say that it's something else because it seems like we're shifting the blame. But how do you explain that? Because I like to say that I've been to the school of patriarchy and they don't teach us that. You know, they don't teach us dismembering of women. You know, we get taught a lot of things. We got taught a lot of nonsense. But that is
level.
On that level, it's scary. You know, on that level, it's scary. But to sort of carry on from there, what happens when, to the function of spirituality, when two nations come together? To give a specific example, when Amaxhosa specifically came into contact with the Khoisan, what happens to people's spirituality in that? Does it change? What happens to the spiritual realm? Because, for example, the word Tiko is a Khoisan word. It's not to say that Amaxhosa didn't have a similar word, but this is the one that came from their union, and it sort of dominated. So linguistically, the Khoisan then impacted how Amaxhosa construct their beliefs. But I want to understand, I see it from this side. What happens on the other side, on the other realm, when two people come together?
And it is for that reason why ama-rituals wethu amaningi kangaka futhi engapheli. This is our constant attempt to be in alignment with that world. So when you meet a Xhosa woman, or Mosotho, you then you want to marry her, and then you go to your parents and say, I saw this particular lady, and then you will hear they will ask, Kimugai? Xhosa, okay. Wakugai? And then when they ask that question, part of it is to tap into the historic. Can we build a friendship with these people? What have they done in the past? What is their potential? What are they capable of? They're like, okay, we understand the history, we understand the background. Now let's deal with the person, because this is now a manifestation of history in the present. Kwatla, Ramona, okay. Fast forward, after maybe we have agreed to go to Zomshata, then we need to go and tell your people and your ancestors, or okay, we have seen Mutu Omoso and we want to build a family with this person, right? When you are done, you will then chill. Meaning you don't patla today, ilor next week, because you need to give those people a chance to give feedback. So the process of preparation happens almost for 2 years when we want to marry this person, because we are cognizant of the fact that we are not alone. And then batla he badimo, okay? Tla utlwa ngwana ko lona last born ya ko lona a tla re ke lorile motho mo solo. a tshella motho poisoning ha o utlwela this description ke mamholo wa medi a hao wa bona like really okay no okay mental note wa bona then you go to your girlfriend and you ask rakgadi ramtsebo studu ambe. You understand? So ancestors begin to be part of this experience to say, I mean, it happened to me too. You know, when I had met someone and I decided, okay, maybe I would like to marry her, I went and I pashad the stuff I saw in dreams. So it's not that reroska munyala, but understand this is the data. Understand horo unyala mutomo yang and what kind of family you're getting married into. And then you make a choice. Unzomshata. Inji. You take that decision. How munyala leso? Badimu they need to have a meeting or okay. Muto waring ka urukopanya le batho ba baso. Le ring. Are lona lentse le phahlitse this week le batla nyala Saturday. There's no time. These people are even getting married and then Rona, we are not even done with discussions. Aye, closer than you. Aye, when don't be like that. Kilinyalo mo. Aye, etle kujala butlo shorta mo. Linyalo la etsahala. Di tente di afufa. Mutolo na itse utla ka di biru stakid. You know all these things. To a point where harinyala, you know, after linyalo rututser mara linyalo lila. I was kwaba busy lapa. You know. What was that? But because we're Christian, then we overlook it. Or maybe we don't care. But if we do care, then we're like, hey man, asambenzo hlol. Harfitla kwa. Ngakaitla lejwetso rai. Mohlomong badimo say they feel left out. Kapa ntate moholo mang does not agree to this makoti. What. But you did not give yourself enough chance to align this experience in the world with that of the spirit world. Do you understand?
So then, when there is a union, let's say they agree to everything, does that union change the structure of the spiritual realm?
It does. It does. All form of movement change the structure of the spiritual realm. Let's take it before you even get married. When as an individual, if you decide, okay, I'm going to stop smoking weed, I'm going to stop abusing alcohol, I'm going to become a better person. Your entourage of ancestors change.
Is it?
Yeah.
As in they change how they function, or you get a different group?
You get a different group. Because we all carry ancestors that are thieves, that are drunkards, that are addicted to one thing or the other, what. So according to your level of maturity, you get aligned to ancestors that complement you. What we see. As you heal, bale baba both about gents Spanish fedil daman hasan. Oh, is it? Yeah, no, daman hasan. So liraba, are you guys going to stop drinking and evolve with this person? They're like, oh, okay, no. What's the process? They're like, come with us, we'll help you. That's how this thing out. When you heal generations. You offer them an opportunity to become better. And some will say, I know it's fine. I'll go to the last born. The last born is still addicted to alcohol. I'll go chill with that guy. Like, oh, okay. They move on. And then Baba Bitiri, who are going to help your new level of choice, your new level of awareness. Then Batsamalwe. You then carry Tate James Tate Force. They are your ancestors. And then you decide you're going to marry this person. They're like, hey, Taman Wanyala. James, do you think you'll be fine with this task of helping this guy becoming a man and becoming a head of the family? Someone else, please come and help and support. Oh, okay, cool. Who's going to help? Oh, all right. Now Eric, yes. You know? And then you get, that's why Nyala, Tonto Ustato be here, Uri. I'm going to become a man, what. Some families, even it's a ritual. You're going to become a man now. But it's a ritual. That process seeks to align you to a new entourage of people that are going to be able to help you in your journey. This childish behavior you see in most married men. Part of it is that the ancestors, they see this person as a boy. There was no alignment that happened. There was no nothing that happened. How guy over Shweta or Makhanya unyezi bara Makhanya ki mama? No, he's a boy. He shouldn't be married that one. If unyezi are not with you. So that's why clearly Angela.
What is, the thing of marriage in spirituality in Black people, I find it so overly dramatic.
Yes.
Like, I find it so overly dramatic.
Yeah.
Firstly, what is the significance of Inyongo?
Inyongo.
Why is it that ancestors refuse to recognize anything unless kune Inyongo somewhere in that, especially when people are getting married?
Inyongo ya baba ngithi.
Painfully so.
Igama elithi baba. Ukubaba in something that is better. Right? So the purpose of experience yes. Anyway, there is the process of inyongo in the spirit world. I don't want to lie to you. But it is such an important currency to those guys that, I don't know what it is. But the superficial interpretation that I got about Linyalo and why Musadia Tasiwa Kanyongo, it is that this person is going to be able to withstand the challenges that come with Linyalo. That is then the social, simplistic interpretation that I got. But in terms of Badimo, I would lie to you, I was not told. I don't know why. Because Kilinyalo, Lintwaso, Inyongo needs to be there. I don't know why. It's a good question. Maybe we need to research it.
Sure. So, when you talk, I've seen some interviews of yours and or online videos that you've posted or stuff, articles or posts that you've put up. You make a lot of reference to pop culture in terms of books, TV, movies, well, especially cartoons. In that, these are the references that we can use for spiritual growth. And when I say books, I don't necessarily mean spiritual books, like self-help books. You refer to novels, fiction, a lot of the time. Are these people putting this information out there deliberately? As in, do they know what they're doing? Is there a kind of a system happening, or are they tapping into what Carl Jung called the collective subconscious? They're doing it subconsciously, tapping into the archetypes of life and spirituality, and what is that?
This world and this realm has its owners. And the agreement is that they can't have, obviously, full ownership of it. And we will share the consciousness of humans. So we treat them as a herd of cows or sheep. But we will obviously have 80%, 85% control and power over them based on the fact that we have money. You asked that question one time. But why is it that evil thrives more than? It's because it's better funded. The good follow the principles of the universal principles of getting money, good principles. Darkness believes in killing people and corruption, even to attain money. And that's why they are much more resourced than the light. So, those that are working for the light will then find ways of helping humanity evolve and become enlightened by all means necessary. Whether cartoon, whether song, whether book, whether advert, they always find a way. So it's about finding it.
Do they know that they're doing that?
Yeah, it's deliberate. It's deliberate. There are no coincidences.
Do you find that when you treat people or when you talk, do you find that you have to tone down what you say so that people don't think washai?
Yes. A lot. And I think it's one of the reasons why I spend most of my time alone, because I don't want to get caught up in their type of madness. I don't want to get to a point where I believe or the creator doesn't exist. I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to a point where I start believing that I can't change the weather. I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to a point where someone says I have cancer and I feel like, I need to call another healer because I'm not good enough to heal cancer. I don't want to get to those levels. I want to stay in my crease. So sometimes I hear people speaking and I know an answer, for example, and I keep quiet. Because if I say it, then I'm going to look crazy. But there's another brother of mine who stays in Pretoria East. We see things similar eye. We hang out and we have conversations around these things. At least we charge each other up to keep our type of crazy afloat. But yeah, to be honest, sometimes I have to tone down. But also it's about what Jesus spoke about, Jesus says that when you plant a seed, the soil needs to be ready. Sometimes I feel as though there's certain stuff we are not ready for, Another interesting fact about me is that sometimes I take 2 weeks to plan to write a status on Facebook because I need to be sure that people are ready to receive what I'm going to write over there. So the one status we are currently working on is, you are not ready to hear who started the church. Right.
What do you think should be happening with our generation to ensure that we grow spiritually in a progressive and positive way?
We first have to learn to I want to put it differently. It's good to package spirituality as an experience that is accessible. But truth is, the downside of presenting spirituality as accessible is that we approach spirituality with the same attitude that we approach popcorn, December, cold drinky, pizza, that if I'm going to introduce meditation, then I'm just gonna do it 1 day, 2 days, and then I'm gonna leave it. So we need to begin to introduce rituals that we are going to take up as part of our day-to-day living, bread and butter. And not because sangomas do it, not because certain people do it, but we do it because we are alive. Or if you are alive, you have to take 30 minutes minimum a day, being quiet, doing nothing, closing your eyes, breathing, focusing on your breath. Set your alarm on your phone that after 30 minutes you're going to stop doing this thing. Does it make sense? So we are learning from Christians, and we've learned from Christians to take spirituality as an elitist experience. And it is the same language that people are using on social media when they refer to sangomas and healers, to say, lo, now the gifted ones. Everyone is gifted. It is this thing from my colleagues, sangomas, who always want to make an emphasis that I'm different from you, and actually I'm better because mina ngithwasile. You see that? We need to stop that. So we need to find a way in which we can begin to introduce rituals that we can practice as humanity purely based on the fact that we are alive. And our affinity or our prayer or our desire is that we must not die. We must live. And then we take up practices and rituals that actually affirm this belief. We want to live. We want to stay alive. There will come a time when Asangoma, if you want to be elevated, there will come a time. There will come a time if you want to be better than anyone, shine brighter than you. There will come a time for that. But when we come into public spaces, social media, let us find ways in which we can help humanity and begin to speak language that everyone can understand, everyone can relate to, for the purposes of keeping us alive.
It is very hard to take in a perspective on existence that we don't hear every day, or one that hasn't been reinforced over and over again throughout our lives. The Genesis creation story is no more plausible than any other myth from a different culture. You can't prove that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters and God said, "Let there be light," any more than you can prove that an Aborigine God dreamt the world into being. Yet, here we are. We exist. And as Black people, we have a particular pain that we are struggling to make sense of, and that pain, its root cause and its impact on us sometimes makes me feel as though we've been knocked down a few levels down the spectrum of existence. It feels like we and our beliefs are flailing in the wind of creation and struggling to hold on, and at any moment we'll be thrown into oblivion. I think that this has taken a toll on how we approach our spirituality and our beliefs. We are so desperate. We are so painfully and debilitatingly desperate that it is difficult to imagine an existence where we are not trying to escape our pain, where our plea to God is not just about getting out of poverty and suffering. That is why when Mkhulu says that we are struggling and our ancestors are struggling, I just can't compute. I can't prove that he's wrong. Actually, it's not even about proof. I just don't want to believe it. It is simply too terrifying. And that terror has been carved into my bones, and that pain is still too raw, and my bones still ache, and I fear that at any moment they will shatter and my kids will have nothing to eat but the splinters of a world that I had hoped that we lived in. If I told you that someone was possessed by a demon, a Black person, you'd probably believe me without a second thought. If I told you that someone, a Black person, was possessed by a spirit from another planet, you would probably think that I'm crazy. And that's because in our spectrum of existence, only supernaturally horrible things can happen to Black people. Have you ever heard of anyone being possessed by the spirit of an angel? A Black person. This is what trauma does. This is what spiritual trauma looks like. In the sprawling mansion that is existence, someone shoved us into a tiny room with no windows, and we've been stuck in there for generations. Something out of Plato's allegory of the cave. uJesu uthwasile. But I can't say that. It's not just that it sounds wrong. It sounds too Black. It sounds dirty. It sounds filthy. It sounds dark. And that stems from our current conception of what we believe spirituality is. Beliefs that most of which we've adopted really in the past 20 to 50 years, really. You can't say Jesu Twasile. You can't say that. You can't use that language. Remember back in the 90s when we went to the white schools and the white teachers would tell us, you can't talk that language here, when we were talking our language amongst ourselves. This is not the townships, Abo Mrs. Van Niekerk would say. You can't talk a black language in spirituality. This is not the townships. Our version of things always sounds wrong. This is why when Mkhulu says Amaswati come from the water, something in you wants to fight. But Amaswati are descendants of the Nguni people. Yes, that's true. Well, the Dogon are from West Africa, but their spiritual identity is rooted in another planet on the other side of the solar system, and they have scientific proof to show for it. You were born to your Motswana mother and your Zulu father, but where does your spirit come from? Where does your soul come from? Boksburg. Does it come from Botswana? Does it come from Amazulu? It comes from God, yes. Everything comes from God, even a rock, even a tree. If you were to write a novel, the whole world in that novel comes from you, right? But is that novel you? The lead character is from you, but is that character you? No. Do you live in the world of that novel? No. Your existence is totally different to those of the characters in your book. All those characters and worlds come from different parts of your expression of understanding. Are you that expression of understanding? No, you're not. Why do we believe that there's only one type of soul? Or why do we believe that a soul is either good or bad? Are there not entirely different kinds of good souls that occupy different aspects of the spectrum of existence, in the same way that an ant and a jellyfish are two beings that occupy seemingly two different worlds and yet are basically on the same level of existence? Are there not spirits that are configured to connect differently with different elements, from water to fire to earth to wind to plant to animals and to other spirits and to people, based on where that spirit originates from? A collective of spirits. A collective of spirits all occupying different levels and aspects of the spectrum. Think about it. Today, we call these collectives Mundao. We call them Umguni, we call them Umdiki. We call them by many names, many of which we've lost over time. Within each collective, and within, for lack of a better word, within each race of beings, there are, just like us, individuals who form part of a broader collective. And just like us, the individuals within these collectives are also on their unique individual journeys. And that is why it is said that Umdao wako or Umguni wako. And it is why it occurs that the spirit of the same name can have a different level of maturity within different people. Also, there are rules on the different levels of the spectrum, and each level has laws that govern what can and cannot happen. As godlike as we may seem to ants and jellyfish, there are things that we cannot do because the laws of nature do not allow. The higher up you go on the spectrum to the level where beings have godlike powers in our eyes, they are also governed by natural laws within that realm. There are animals that can move between seemingly two different worlds. There are animals that can move between water and land. And the animals that can move between land and the sky. Likewise, there are beings on the spectrum that can move between different realms. And just like us, there are beings that cannot move between different realms. It took both your mother and your father to bring you into this world. Each of them played a different biological role in the creation of your being. Your mother has a different physiological ability compared to your father. And in your upbringing, your mother and your father provide different aspects of your mental and physical and spiritual well-being. But on top of that, you have your grandparents, and then you have your great-grandparents, and so on until the beginning of creation. All of them coming from different places across space and time. It took a constellation of people to bring you into this physical existence. And likewise, It took a constellation of spiritual beings to facilitate this very process. Beings with different capacities and abilities, all coming from different aspects of the spectrum across space and time. So, is it far-fetched then to imagine that Amaswati have their origins in what is essentially a spiritual version of an ocean? That's for you to think about. There's a phrase that has been doing the rounds on social media that goes, by healing yourself, you heal your ancestors. I hope that after listening to this episode, you will realize not just how true this is, but how very important it actually is. Spirituality is a strange world, and much of it defies logic. Yet, you know that it is true. But in knowing that it is true, you don't know what you don't know. My name is Vusomzi Nqande. Thank you so very much for joining me on yet another episode of The Journey Kwantu. Thank you for all the kind words and feedback, and I wish you light, I wish you courage, and I wish you all the very best on your journey. Makwande.